And before this video begins, I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. Hello everyone and welcome to another glorious day in Monktopia, where we all live blessed lives thanks to our wonderful monk overlords. Isn't life lovely? Doctor Who Series 10 is full of highs and lows, but right in the middle of the series is the ambitious Monk Trilogy, as it's often called. It begins with a fantastic episode all about living in a simulation, continues with a decent middle part where the Doctor loses and the monks take over, before it all culminates in Lie of the Land, which introduces us to an Earth ruled under an iron fist by the monks, who rewrite history and run a police state to maintain control. It's literally 1984. Lie of the Land has a lot to achieve, being the final part of this trilogy and needing to wrap up the story in a satisfying way. It has a lot of concepts and a fascinating world to play with, but does it succeed? Or does it crumble under the weight of its story and fail to flesh things out in a satisfying way? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out. So take a seat and try not to anger the memory police, because it's time to take a deep dive into The Lie of the Land. The Lie of the Land opens with possibly one of the strongest cold opens of the entire 12th Doctor era, as we watch this unsettling propaganda broadcast presented by the Doctor himself, showing us this perverse rewriting of Earth's history. The monks have altered everything to have ever happened, making it seem like they've always been humanity's benevolent guides and a nurturing, caring presence, helping our every move and being behind every major innovation or world event.
How lucky Earth is to have an ally as powerful and as tender as the monks.
I actually really enjoy how patchy the photos look, with the monks awkwardly photoshopped in, because it's further proof of how they've just forced themselves into our history, completely controlling all information in this dystopian world. And this world is honestly the best part of Lie of the Land, showing us the culmination of the monks' invasion strategy and the full extent of their plan. It's a beautifully grim and grey looking world, with eerily quiet streets and a population scared to express themselves. It very much keeps to Extremis' exploration of free will and constructed realities, since the monks rewriting history in this way has created a fake reality of sorts, with the majority of the populace completely unaware of the forces manipulating them and denying their free will because of this totalitarian regime. Like I said, it's literally 1984. George Orwell's seminal work 1984 is, and always will be, one of the most influential novels exploring totalitarianism and future dystopias. Therefore, it's absolutely no surprise that this episode draws heavily from it as inspiration, with the monks controlling information, rewriting history, and employing propaganda to maintain constant, unquestioned power. The setting of this episode mirrors 1984's depiction of a society where truth is malleable, and reality is actually whatever those in power dictate it to be. The Doctor's role in broadcasting propaganda is similar to 1984's Ministry of Truth, which is the main source of distorting facts and spreading misinformation, with protagonist Winston Smith working for this ministry and carrying out these acts of changing history, much like the Doctor here.
Your future is taken care of.
The concept of Big Brother is also echoed in the omnipresent influence of the monks, able to remove people's ability to distinguish between truth and lies, accepting this false version of history. French philosopher Michel Foucault explored the idea of power being based on knowledge, and knowledge being a tool for exerting power over others. We see this with the monks, who remove knowledge to keep their power, much like the society in Fahrenheit 451, which was a dystopia built upon controlling knowledge and censoring dissenting ideas by burning books to suppress any alternative viewpoints. By fabricating the entirety of human history and positioning themselves as benevolent rulers, the monks eliminate resistance, since most people can't reliably distinguish between the real past and the fake one imposed upon them. So they choose subservience because they don't want to rock the boat and be punished, a common tool of control by authoritarian regimes throughout history. This plan by the monks to manipulate the human race with false history and fake news is fascinating and a great example of totalitarian dystopia, but I do find that it isn't explored nearly as thoroughly as it could and should be, since a lot of the deeper implications and effects end up skipped over both because of the runtime and the wider Doctor Who style storytelling. It's a real shame, and it's a big reason why the episode struggles to get off the ground, because all of this world building and all these themes end up feeling like a missed opportunity. It's especially a missed opportunity because of the ever-growing relevance of such a narrative. In 2005, The Long Game also explored concepts like fake news and the manipulation of media to control the population. But these concepts were even more relevant in 2017 and continue to be to this day. As news media becomes more and more politicised, with right-wing and left-wing sources fighting to control the narrative with their spin on events, it becomes harder and harder to tell what's real anymore, since it's becoming ever more obvious how authorities and institutions can shape and control public perception through misinformation or slightly altering how facts are presented in order to twist stories in their favour. This is obviously what Lie of the Land wants to explore, with the monks serving as a metaphor for this psychological manipulation, and the episode challenging us to consider the implications of accepting official narratives without question, emphasising the importance of critical thinking and challenging established truths. By making the Doctor this figurehead for the monks, it even shows how trusted figures can be roped into spreading influence and perpetuating misinformation, like we constantly see on Twitter these days. And then Bill stands on the other end of the spectrum, one of the few aware of the monks' manipulation and resisting their influence as she tries to preserve reality and fight against their tyranny. I guess you could say she's a free thinker. But whilst all these ideas and themes are great on paper and when you analyse them, they really do feel so underdeveloped within the episode, especially when Oxygen just a few episodes earlier had shown how to perfectly pack social commentary into Doctor Who. But the commentary in Lie of the Land just kind of gets lost in the mix and ends up frustratingly underbaked, and almost half-arsed, honestly. Another great concept that ends up underused is this episode's memory police. Obviously, with any police state or totalitarian regime, you need your enforcers, like the firefighters in Fahrenheit 451, or the Thought Police in 1984. We're introduced to the Memory Police in a great scene at the start, where they arrest a woman for crimes against truth, ripping her from her family and bundling her into the back of a van.
Therefore I sentence you to 10 years in a labour camp.
It's a brilliantly dystopian sequence with these armed soldiers breaking down the door, emphasising the oppressive nature of the monks' rule and showing how far-reaching their control extends. The Memory Police are the foot soldiers responsible for maintaining the rewritten history and ensuring people believe in the lie of the monks being humanity's saviours and protectors. They're the human symbol of authoritarian, fascist power and how real-world regimes employ these very real tactics to maintain power. The Memory Police look great, they have a great aura around them, and they genuinely feel like an imposing, scary part of this regime. But again, they're not really given much depth or actual background in the episode.
You are charged with the manufacture and possession of propaganda intended to undermine the true history.
The concept of policing memory itself could have been used really well to explore issues of free will, truth and resistance, much like the rest of the trilogy. But instead, they just feel like generic background villains and a narrative device to add basic tension, without any actual impact on the overall resolution. Again, it's really frustrating and a disappointment after how well they were introduced at the start. They just feel wasted and like an afterthought because they don't show up again until the very end just to show how the monks' control has been broken. They're a completely unnecessary part of the narrative because they're just not considered, and it's really annoying. In Pyramid at the End of the World, Bill gave the monks consent to take control of Earth in return for restoring the Doctor's eyesight. A clever way of bringing his sight back whilst maintaining a sense of consequence and stakes, instead of it being cheap. Bill's consent was obtained under extreme emotional duress, but this episode doesn't really follow through on the ramifications and implications of this. Like, there's no real reflection on the ethics of manipulating someone into making such a choice. nor is there much reflection on the guilt Bill should realistically feel for selling out the world like this. It just feels like another, you guessed it, missed opportunity. Anyway, Bill is living in this oppressive new world, trying to make do and survive, having these conversations with an imaginary version of her mum, which conveniently frame the narrative and give us lots of exposition. We'll get to Bill's mum later because, my god, that awful ending is inescapable. Anyway, good old Nardi has also managed to survive the monks' takeover, reuniting with Bill in a nice scene that injects some levity into the episode.
What noise do spaceship doors make? Shook, shook, obviously.
It's a sweet reunion, but it's pretty much the most spotlight Nardole gets all episode, because he doesn't really do anything, especially compared to Oxygen and Extremis before, so Nardole is another element of the episode that feels pretty underutilized, kind of reverting back to basic comic relief and not having much to do. But hey, at least he can progress the plot by taking Bill to the Doctor. Yes, it turns out the Doctor has been broadcasting his propaganda from a big prison ship offshore. Why? I don't know, it's just plot convenience so we can get a classic infiltration mission as Nardole and Bill sneak aboard. I will admit it's pretty tense and chilling as there's a random spot check, combined with a monk entering, for some reason, carrying such a creepy aura about it. Although, given the fact Bill was the one to grant the consent and they obviously know who she is in relation to the Doctor.
You represent the greatest power on the planet. You represent the Doctor.
Why doesn't this monk recognize her or care that she's there? It's just kind of weird. Anyway, once our dynamic duo reach the Doctor's chambers, we get that fantastic scene of the Doctor seemingly being a willing supporter of the monks, giving a speech about how humanity is stagnating and regressing. It's a really well written speech, showing how a genuinely morally compromised or even evil version of the Doctor would rationalize and actively support the monks' occupation.
I had to stop you, or at least not stand in the way of someone else who wanted to.
I think that's what works so well about this speech, because it's not comically evil. He still voices his opposition to the monks, but he views them as the best saviors for the flaws of humanity.
Whatever it takes, I'm going to save you from yourselves.
You know, the lesser of two evils. The speech is not hugely out of character, which is why it's so great, because it still uses the same kind of logic and reasoning the 12th Doctor usually does employ, this time twisting them for this darker purpose, and it really shows us how easily the Doctor could be evil.
But they bring peace and order.
And as the Doctor berates Bill for causing this crisis and continues to show his support for the monks, we get a well-scored and well-acted response from Bill. Pearl Mackie really gives it her all, and I find it one of the best moments for Bill as a character, especially as she's driven to shoot at the Doctor in a rousing, emotional moment. But this is where it all goes downhill for so many reasons, as it turns out to be a big trick to ensure Bill is still loyal to humanity and not working for the monks.
Good girl!
First of all, the fake out regeneration is incredibly stupid, not only because Bill and the new viewers don't actually know what it is yet, but also because it's so clearly there for fake drama in trailers, which feels insultingly deceptive and almost like clickbait, because there's no need for it.
Regeneration a little bit too much.
The reveal of it being a big 5D chess plan also recontextualizes the whole scene and the Doctor snapping at Bill, because now it feels like excessive emotional trauma to put this young, scared companion through.
I fought against it for you!
I understand the need for him to test Bill's loyalty and how far she'd go, which could be used to make a wider point about the use of manipulation even with good intention, and how the Doctor is so willing to blur moral lines to succeed, but it doesn't make that point. It just wanted a big dramatic moment to stick in the trailers. I know tricks and traps are commonplace in dystopian media, again just look at 1984. So it makes sense that the Doctor would have to push Bill like this, but it seems unnecessarily cruel even by his standards. A very manipulative move by both the Doctor and the episode itself, especially because the rest of the scene is all comedic with whimsical Murray Gold music. The whole thing just feels so forced, manufactured, and unnecessary. It doesn't fit the episode at all. Also, just as a side note, Clara would have absolutely slapped him into the stratosphere if he had ever tried anything like this with her. I really don't like how this scene turns out, and honestly, it's probably the turning point for the episode's quality as a whole. Now that the band is back together, the Doctor takes Bill into the vault to meet Missy, who was reintroduced in Extremis and revealed as the occupant of this mysterious vault. I appreciate how it immediately shows the true stakes of the situation, that the Doctor has to turn to Missy, his greatest enemy and someone he really shouldn't trust. It's just one of those small but incredibly effective ways to make a threat that much more intimidating.
Blimey, has it really come to that?
It turns out Missy has met and defeated the monks before. Peter Capaldi and Michelle Gomez are an absolute perfect match as their respective characters, so I love the scene as she helps guide him towards understanding how the monks operate and keep the planet subservient. It's like a game to Missy, testing the Doctor's intelligence and deductions and enjoying every second of it.
God, no, it's freezing. Absolutely freezing. Couldn't be colder.
I appreciate how the scene touches upon Missy's overall redemption arc, with her solution being to just kill the person who gave consent to the monk's rule, like she did in the past when she just pushed a little girl into a volcano. I really love how this changes the tone of the scene, the Doctor admonishing Missy for suggesting the brain death of Bill, only for her to turn it around on him and call him out for his single-minded perception of goodness. He believes she can't change, she can't genuinely reform. But I love how Missy points out that even though her solution means Bill has to die, it is still a solution and it still saves the world. Something she would never usually do and has no interest in doing. Missy is genuinely helping, a sincere attempt to engage with the process of redemption. It's just cold calculation like the Doctor himself would make. And we saw that in Mummy on the Orient Express, for example, except this time it would affect him personally, so he's unable to see the evolution of Missy's character and the slow shifting of her moral compass. It's a great scene to continue building up Missy's story arc of redemption, although again, much like everything in this episode, it is underexplored and too brief, with most of the analysis and the links you can make just being informed by the knowledge of what comes later in the series, rather than the strength of this single scene alone. But even with that said, it's still a damn good scene.
But like it or not, I just saved this world because I want to change.
Back in the hero's makeshift base in a train car, which isn't established, we get that moment of Bill accepting her likely death to the reluctance of the Doctor and Nardole, who obviously refuse to let her die. Instead, the Doctor wants to plug himself into the monk's magical propaganda machine and save the day himself. Oh, and conveniently this machine is in a pyramid in central London, because of course it is. Yeah, a big problem with this episode is how small in scope it feels, despite this being a worldwide occupation. All the action just takes place in these isolated locations, with a startling lack of exploration as to how the global population is experiencing this life under the monk's rule. Extremis and Pyramid at the End of the World were kind of globe-trotting adventures, taking us from the Vatican State to Switzerland, America and Turkmenistan, with lots of thought-provoking ideas and themes exploring the nature of reality, free will, and all sorts of other philosophical questions. However, Lie of the Land is instead just kind of a conventional alien invasion plot that doesn't really address a lot of those earlier ideas, and is constrained to one specific local region, which betrays the scale needed for such an epic and dramatic story. We never even find out how Bill managed to get home from the literal Middle East in the previous episode, or where the TARDIS is during all this. Hell, for such a British-based episode, where are all the familiar characters from earlier episodes in the series, like Shireen, Moira or Penny? It sure would have been nice to see how Bill's actual friends and family were affected by her giving Earth over to the monks. I do enjoy the atmosphere as the protagonists begin their infiltration of the pyramid, starting with that great reveal of the monks tricking the planet into thinking there's more of them than there really are. And then we get the shaky cam of our characters running down the derelict street. It's strong stuff, and it's cool how they show the signal getting stronger as the protagonists close in on the transmitter, especially when generic soldier number 1 has his cassette player shot so he can't hear their protection audio. But the newly reprogrammed soldier man quickly then gets neck pinched by Nardole. Oh yeah, he exists. I do have some issues with this gunfight though, since it shows how inconsistently the monks' abilities are defined. Sometimes they seem omnipotent and unstoppable, but other times, like this, they're flimsy and can just be easily shot by bullets. It seems weird considering in the last episode they casually caught an entire US Air Force bomber and a nuclear sub. Kind of undermines the stakes and makes the monks feel like a significant afterthought when they can just be shot with a normal bullet. Anyway, now we get to the big projection room, which looks really good to be fair. All these triangular screens on the wall and this really cool looking monk with his brain exposed. It's a striking visual and great set design. The Doctor touches his weird creepy brain thing and starts to succeed in his plan, only for the monks to fight back because I guess they remembered to be powerful again. So he goes pinging off into a wall. Oh well, looks like Missy was right then. I do like the scene as the Doctor begs Bill not to sacrifice herself. It's actually quite reminiscent of River's sacrifice at the library, a death that weighs on the 12th Doctor more than most because of beryllium. So there's a nice parallel there as his close friend and companion Bill decides to sacrifice herself and burn out her brain to save the world.
God, it was worth it.
The music is great as she steps up willing to destroy herself to redeem herself for a choice that caused this all to begin with. The moral dilemma here is obvious. Should one person sacrifice their life for the good of many, or is even that too high of a price to pay? Throughout the trilogy, the theme of sacrifice is emphasised as a necessary element in the fight for freedom. The Shadow Doctor sacrifices himself to email the warning to the real Doctor. The Doctor tries to sacrifice himself to stop the monks in the biolab. Then Bill sacrifices Earth to save him. Bill's willingness to now sacrifice herself to break the psychic link shows her selflessness and underlines the idea that fighting for freedom often comes at a personal cost, because you have to make hard and often painful decisions, including facing your own death for the greater good. Bill is central to the entire trilogy, and her story culminates here with this defiance and emotional strength, showing the power of individual agency and choice in resisting and overcoming authoritarian control. But even that doesn't seem to be enough here, as instead we get a visit from our old friend Huey Lewis and the News.
That's the power of love.
Yes, as Bill starts to falter and lose the fight against the monks, she begins to think of her mother, thanks to all those photos the Doctor took for her. Talk about plot convenience. Yes, in a very sickly sweet moment, Bill's fake memories of her mother prove powerful enough to break the link, creating a new truth that inspires humanity to fight back and overthrow the monks.
A glimpse of freedom, but a glimpse is all you need.
And hey look, I get what they're going for. It's a moment symbolic of how personal experiences, emotions, and connections can help people resist manipulation. Memory is something that can anchor ourselves in reality, especially in a world like this where reality has been twisted. Bill's pure, idealized love for her mother is a counterforce, because it's proof that love is more powerful than fear or indoctrination. It's using the monks' plan against them, and a climax that symbolises the reclamation of a collective truth, but it just feels so tonally off. The whole trilogy up to this point had a lot of dark, complex themes, and this episode especially had a very oppressive dystopian atmosphere. So for this climax to be so saccharine really detracts from the episode's impact and makes things feel so fragmented, rather than cohesive and fitting. And whilst Bill's emotional connection to her mum is touching, it feels so painfully simplistic, especially with the complex global nature established in the last two episodes. There was so much great build-up and strong multi-layered storytelling, but they throw it all away for the most cliche possible approach of love conquers all, which is always such a cheap and frustrating ending.
Bill's mum, you just went viral.
After Bill magically breaks the psychic link, the monks just leave. Well, some of them get shot, but it's an incredibly quick revolution and the monks don't even really try to fight back. which is weird for such a powerful and calculating foe. The previous episodes presented the monks as a hyper-intelligent and methodical villain, who account for every possibility and every outcome, but this time they're reduced to passive rulers who stand idly by until their control is disrupted and then they just run away. They're a complete afterthought in this ending, which retroactively cheapens the threat they previously posed, and we still end up having so many questions about them and how they could achieve all these things, like rewriting history itself and placing down the pyramids. The monks just end up a pretty one-dimensional villain with unrealised potential, and they're a far cry from the intriguing, terrifyingly powerful force they were in the previous 2 episodes. And, of course, after they leave, humanity just forgets all about them and this brutally oppressive regime they lived in for 6 months. Hey, I've seen that one before! Yes, as the Doctor explains, the monks have erased themselves from everyone's minds, so it's as if nothing ever happened at all. So there's no need for the episode or the series to deal with the aftermath of the monks ruling the world. Everything just reverts back to normal without addressing any of the many potential societal or psychological impacts. And I think the worst part is the episode tries to spin that as a message of how humanity never learns and never grows, but that really just feels like a weak excuse for pressing a massive reset button.
Sorry.
Especially when the previous episodes had been so strong in using consequences to undo things like the Doctor's blindness. But here, they're just a huge plot convenience, reverting everything back to the status quo. It just really sucks as an ending.
Humanity's doomed to never learn from its mistakes.
The very final scene of the episode is strong though, as we cut back to the Doctor and Missy in the vault, with the latter beginning to display a shocking sense of self-awareness and guilt for all the people she's killed over the years. It's a great little moment, this uncharacteristic remorse showing she really does have potential to change and redeem herself as a person, even if the Doctor remains understandably skeptical of this change of heart. Remember, this is the same character that turned the entire human race into mutilated technological monstrosities, and also converted all of humanity's dead into Cybermen. This is the same psychopath that tried to make the Doctor kill Clara, destroyed Atlantis, and then also an entire chunk of the universe itself. The Master is a deeply evil and, to most people, an irredeemable monster. So to see Missy actually start to display sincere remorse for actions like these is a huge moment for the character and for the show itself.
Keep remembering all the people I've killed.
It's a great way to establish that she's not only capable of becoming good, especially after her outright refusal to do so at the start of Series 9, but also prove that she is becoming better with this change in morality. This short scene and conversation really helps to solidify that idea and set up how the second half of the series deals with this character arc and the nature of her change into a more sympathetic and morally good person.
You didn't tell me about this bit.
I've always wanted to like The Lie of the Land. I've tried really hard for so long to see it as misunderstood or underrated, but it really is a mess. It starts off so well, introducing this brilliantly grim and depressing totalitarian world inspired by 1984. There's a lot of fantastic dystopian imagery, and the revisionist history power of the monks is a fascinating wrinkle. But then it just loses its way and struggles to find a purpose. The memory police only exist for one scene and then get forgotten about. Ironically, the monks are also an afterthought of a threat characterised so differently and much worse than the previous 2 episodes. There are obviously a lot of good scenes in the episode, like the opening, Missy's vault scenes, and the first half of the Doctor's evil fake-out, but these are surrounded by meandering scenes that feel stunted and badly put together. Even the characters feel awkwardly integrated, like Nardole just barely even existing for most of it. And then there's the ending, which is one of the most cheap and cliche endings of the entire Moffat era, which is saying a lot. I absolutely hate Power of Love endings, and this one is especially egregious because of how ill-fitting it is both tonally and narratively. The trilogy built itself up with so much rich thematic storytelling about philosophical concepts and all this depth, only for the ending to come along and ruin it all. Therefore, despite the shining moments, I can't really give Lie of the Land higher than a D ranking, which really pains me to say. It feels like a rushed, badly flowing episode that doesn't fit within the trilogy it concludes. It's full of wasted potential, and I honestly feel like it's the kind of narrative that simply cannot work in such a short runtime. We needed far more time within this dystopian world, but we didn't get it, and the episode falls apart as a result. Like I said, I really wanted to like The Lie of the Land. It has some of the strongest concepts I've seen in Doctor Who, and really plays with some fantastic ideas and world building, but it doesn't follow through on them, making it such a disappointment in almost every way possible. But what do you think? Was I too harsh on Lie of the Land, or does its reputation deserve a bit more revisionism? Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez, my Platinum level patron Matthew Burns, and my Gold level patrons Chris Douglas and Daniel Shillito. Thank you so much for your support.